They were so engrossed in their conversation that Amoy interrupted them for a moment, offering to take their coffee to a corner so as not to disturb them, and asking them to continue with what they were doing. This made them a bit uncomfortable, but John wanted to know what Chloe's request was, which made her nervous. After she explained her situation, John understood. Accepting help from the professor would put pressure on her, but accepting his help might feel like a burden, considering the possibility of getting a B grade. Although Chloe wasn't too excited about the idea, John realized she was a dedicated student and would probably do better if she pushed herself on her own. Chloe explained that getting a B would prevent her from securing the scholarship, which made him envy how great she looked despite her worries. Hearing this, he agreed to help her, but with one condition, that she wouldn't be too demanding or criticize him for doing things wrong, as it would upset him. In reality, Chloe appreciated him too much to be demanding since she saw him as a saint, and his brilliance dazzled her. Chloe thanked him profusely and promised to buy him lots of delicious treats in the future, which left John a bit confused by her actions. Meanwhile, Amoy watched the situation, thinking they were getting along well. Now they would practice together, something Chloe eagerly anticipated, as she hadn't yet seen the performance. Although John offered to accompany her to watch it, Chloe preferred to go alone, and they agreed to practice after she saw it. Chloe also showed interest in how things were going between Amoy and Jan, offering her help if needed, but they were using a tripod to record their performance, which would be helpful with Chloe as well. At that moment, she thanked Amoy for lending her partner. Amoy assured her it wasn't a problem, but mentioned she had to leave now. John promised to send the edited video to Amoy later, and Chloe promised to buy her delicious food as a thank you. Amoy encouraged them and thanked them for the coffee. Before leaving the auditorium, Amoy handed something to Chloe, a sweet treat from someone as sweet as her. This made Chloe tease John about the gift she received from the lovely Amoy, though he had also received a similar treat from her. Since it was getting late, they agreed to meet again next week to have lunch before he went home. He agreed, and although Chloe offered to take out the trash, he said it wasn't necessary as the bin was on his way. They said their goodbyes, agreeing to meet again soon. Before leaving, Chloe wanted to tell him something. She thanked him and asked him to take care of himself. John appreciated the gesture and noticed how beautiful she looked while smiling. That same afternoon, John was looking for something to eat and considered going to the store when he unexpectedly received a call from Han. This surprised him, and when he answered, Han showed interest in his plans for the next day. Although John had pending tasks, Han expressed her desire to see him as soon as possible, asking him to cancel his plans and suggesting he spend the day with her. Han requested that he rearrange his schedule today so they could have the next day free. The main reason was that she wanted to pray with him, which took John by surprise. He asked what time they would meet. "We are so weak when it comes to flesh," he thought. They planned to meet for lunch, and Han eagerly anticipated that moment. She also scolded him for not calling her after their last prayer night. John explained he had been busy and hadn't had the chance, but promised to call her next time. Han noticed John's compliance, but knew it was necessary, because otherwise she might get upset, something she thought was fine as long as he stayed obedient. Han reminded him to continue their sermon the next day at 7 a.m. sharp. Although John had planned to study, he had no choice but to give it his best effort. The next day in the city, we see the beautiful Han waiting for John, growing impatient. She didn't like being kept waiting, unaware that he was already behind her until he said, "Hello," startling her. John noticed how early she had arrived, though she didn't want to admit it. It wasn't because she was upset, but because she had arrived quicker than expected. Since she left her house quickly, she wanted to invite him to eat before heading to their destination. On their way, Han seemed very excited. When asked what she wanted to eat, she said she wanted a Titan, prompting John to cover her mouth for being so reckless. However, she began kissing his hand, pleading with him, suggesting she wanted to spend the whole day with him. This embarrassed John because everyone around them could hear. By the time they exited the elevator, John felt humiliated that everyone had overheard them, but Han didn't mind, as they were planning to play fight later, telling him to stop being so shy since it was just joke. Of course, if the roles were reversed, it wouldn't be the same. Han would be fine with him boasting about winning her over differently than others since she was now crazy about him. John noticed how Han expressed herself and couldn't believe how innocent her expressions were. He still hadn't fully adapted to her. Later, while eating, John realized how expensive the place was, despite not liking how it looked. All of this was due to the high prices. Han told him to just appreciate how delicious it was, something John admitted. However, Han wanted him to tell her something interesting, but since John didn't know what to talk about, Han insisted that he say something. When he brought up the topic of Chloe, it obviously upset Han. He then asked what they would do after eating, suggesting they watch a movie or buy something. Not receiving a response, he proposed going for a coffee. That's when Han thought John wanted to go on a date with her. Though he was merely trying to find a topic for conversation, Han agreed to the idea of a date later. Everything John suggested, mentioned, or looked at, Han always insisted on buying it for him. almost like sugar. John pointed it out to her, but it embarrassed her because he said no to everything, which seemed to bother her a little. However, when John tried on a sweatshirt for Han, he found it cute and wondered how it would look on her since she usually didn't wear that type of clothing. John was curious to see her in it, though Han admitted she did wear that style. Both ended up a little embarrassed. Changing the subject, Han mentioned she'd like to do a costume game, something John hadn't been thinking about. She was willing to do anything, though John wasn't referring to the strange things she suggested. Even so, she insisted that he choose something, but John wouldn't buy it. He then asked why she was being so insistent. Han found it annoying because it seemed like he didn't want to accept a gift from her, but in reality, she just wanted to buy him something. Hearing this, John had no choice but to accept her gift, noticing how happy it made Han to give it to him. Before anything else, John thanked her for the present and promised to take good care of it. Although she was willing to buy him more things, he was content with just that one gift and acted affectionately toward her. Now John proposed getting something to drink so that Han could rest, and so he could make her happy with her favorite beverage, leaving her alone for a moment. She didn't usually like cute things, but everything was changing as she blushed thinking about John. She only wanted to play fight with him, but now she thought she was going crazy because she still felt nervous the entire time. Suddenly, she heard a voice calling her. It was a guy who had seen her from afar and was interested in asking for her number. Han found the guy irritating just by looking at his face and had no intention of giving him her number. That's when she asked him the size of his Cheeto, clearly referring to the bag of chips. Just then, John arrived, and Han explained that he had a pakataxo because she was so obsessed with its flavor that no one else interested her. She told the guy to leave. He didn't believe her at first, but after seeing John, he knew she wasn't lying. After handing her the coffee, John found out what the guy wanted, which annoyed Han. But she explained that she was exclusive to John, who couldn't help but notice how beautiful she was. Now John wanted to know where they would go next. Han, on the other hand, was very tired, so she suggested going to a cool, cozy place. John understood and agreed. They arrived at a luxurious place, something John noticed right away because it looked expensive, although Han could afford it just for him. John thanked her for the luxurious room she rented, as he enjoyed the bed, which was almost the size of his entire room. However, Han had other plans for him. Han now wanted to kiss him, and though John remained silent, they ended up kissing. Since he had been sweating earlier in the day, he wanted to shower first. Han wanted to join him, which made John widen his eyes. After a good shower, where their backs glistened, John was truly exhausted, appreciating the spaciousness of the hotel. Hearing Han ask if he was sleepy, he denied it, noticing that she was wearing something very beautiful, something clearly meant for him. Knowing how she looked, Han suggested John could choose something different next time, though he was already captivated by what he saw. Han asked if it would be a work uniform or a school uniform, something John wouldn't admit to because it seemed inappropriate. That's when Han asked him to wait a moment. While she was away, John genuinely enjoyed everything he was seeing. When Han returned from behind, she showed him a photo of herself in high school. Seeing it, John was enchanted, but more than anything, remembered when a girl who looked just like her once stole money from him. However, he wondered why she had photos of herself from high school, admitting that she looked beautiful and complimenting her hair. The reason for this was that Han wanted him to feel proud of her, so that he would later admire the charms she had developed over time. This made John grateful, but now he wanted to return to the present, where he could admire her best version, the one where, as we know, they have wild moments, and they continued like that for almost an entire chapter. After a while, watching a cooking show on TV, it seemed as if everything was normal. Han noticed this, and being so excited, wanted to know if John was hungry so they could order some food. Seeing the service available, nothing on the menu appealed to them, so they suggested fried chicken, though they would have to go downstairs to get it. Han decided to order wings with sauce, something John also liked. While waiting, Han wanted to play for a while longer, which surprised John, though she was joking. He suddenly got close to her, as he didn't like joking about those things. She thought it was crazy because John was acting as if nothing was happening, even though he was also joking. But in reality, he did want to continue praying. So, they resumed their sutra until the phone vibrated with the notification for their food delivery. The food smelled so good that John already wanted to eat. At that moment, he received a message from Chloe, asking if he was free to practice on Wednesday. She also emphasized that he should study for the exams. He lied, saying he was already studying, but still agreed to meet that day without telling anyone. This felt strange to John because it was different from how he remembered Chloe when he first met her, but he brushed it off. After entering the room with Han and their food, she seemed to drift into another world after eating her fried chicken. John accompanied Han to the nearest station so she could go home, being her daddy's princess. She invited him to watch a movie next time and told him he could stay at the hotel since she had reserved a full night for him, and encouraged him to take advantage of the breakfast because it was delicious. While John returned to the hotel, he thought about the fact that Han might like him, though he couldn't believe it possible. Later, he lay down to rest in bed until he remembered everything they had prayed about earlier with Han. He couldn't sleep all night. The next day, John was standing and had forgotten what he needed to do when he heard the voice of Emma, who was with her friends. This made him glance at her repeatedly, and she noticed his gaze. Despite that, Emma continued as if he wasn't there, but John couldn't take his eyes off her, which embarrassed Emma. To make him stop staring, she gave him a hard hit, surprising her friends. Emma explained he was a clubmate. Her friends jokingly warned her to be more careful because she was too aggressive. She felt regretful for hitting John so hard. At that moment, came to John's rescue, something Emma noticed since they had been spending a lot of time together lately and getting along well. However, Emma's friends called her, so she joined them, feeling remorse for hitting John. Meanwhile, John explained to Amoli that he was going to practice with Chloe and then study, something Amoli admired because practicing with Chloe seemed cool to her. John noticed her interest and invited her to join them, as her skills could be helpful. Although Amoli felt shy about receiving the invitation, she accepted because she wanted to see how Chloe performed. John suggested that Amoli be in charge of recording the practice session. They had agreed to meet at 3:30. Since they didn't know the exact location, they planned to look for a blonde in nearby cafes. Chloe met them at one of the cafes, which was easy to guess because the blonde loved coffee. Although Chloe had originally planned to notify them of the location after finishing her coffee, now that they were there, she kindly offered them something to drink and invited Amole to choose something, expressing how much she enjoyed her presence. When John saw the cakes, he wanted to pick two, which led Chloe to think he had spotted something delicious. However, it was simply because he wanted 2 cakes, which annoyed Chloe slightly, prompting her to jokingly threaten to send him to the other world. As they walked to the auditorium, they talked about how impressive the play had been. At one point, Chloe remembered that Leon would be the lead in their next production, something he didn't really want to do, but had no choice. Chloe offered to help him if he needed it, while Amo internally apologized because she had gotten him involved in the situation, though she trusted Leon because of his skill. The blonde was proud of the club's lighting team, but their conversation was interrupted by Amelie, who asked if they would be acting in similar outfits since they looked like a couple. Chloe had noticed this too, but hadn't said anything because Amo was with them, explaining it was an unfortunate coincidence. John barely noticed and joked with the blonde about buying the same clothes on sale. Still, Anole commented that they looked very cute, like a real couple, noting that their height difference worked well. This prompted Chloe to threaten John, telling him to take off his shirt. Later, as Chloe read through the script, she realized the scene involved a lot of body contact, which embarrassed her, especially the kiss scene. She even considered reporting it to the teacher, but seeing how Amo and John managed it made her want to try it out. John asked Amo to find a good angle that would flatter them. Chloe had only memorized a few lines, while John had forgotten everything. Nevertheless, the blonde asked how they managed the kiss scene, and John joked that it had to be a passionate one to work, leaving Chloe furious. He quickly clarified that it was a joke and that they just moved their heads at the last moment. Since Amo was helping them film, they practiced from different angles. Before starting, John mentioned to Chloe how excited Amo was to watch her perform, subtly pressuring her not to disappoint her beloved girl. This made Chloe hit him with the script due to the pressure he was putting on her. After a while, both John and Chloe were yelling at each other as the blonde felt awkward being around him. Despite this, they kept trying over and over, with Chloe getting nervous every time John grabbed her by the waist. Amo, however, was the only one enjoying herself. It wasn't until the situation grew more serious that Amo noticed the tension. Chloe cursed the teacher for all of this. Before anything else could happen, John reminded Chloe to tilt her head, or they would end up kissing, which embarrassed Chloe. It was something she already knew, but had taken as a joke. John pointed out her nervousness, saying she was passing it on to him, though he admitted he didn't feel very skilled in acting. This was different from when he had passed the entrance exam for the club. His comment triggered a change in Chloe, but not before she bit him in retaliation for the pressure he had put on her. Emily then commented that if they kept acting like this, they wouldn't be able to reach their goal. Hearing this, Chloe let go of John to think for a moment, remembering that it was just acting. They weren't actually kissing. She compared it to the fact that others had managed it and thanked John and Amo for their time, expressing her desire to continue. Her lines were short and the pace was fast, so she somberly prepared to move forward. Now they would have to film everything again for the final take, deciding which side each would turn to. However, both seemed to confuse their directions. Amo planned to record until the last expression to ensure they captured a good performance, given that this would be their last attempt. Chloe then invited John to dinner afterward, reminding him once again which side to turn to. As they started, Amo recorded them with her phone while Chloe and John began their scene. The embrace made Chloe feel shy, especially as they got closer. Although the blonde wanted to remember her side, she was too nervous to do so. On the other hand, John had forgotten which side to turn to as well, but they continued with the scene anyway. Getting closer and closer, John noticed that they were on the same side, which led to a soft kiss that both of them realized. Emily was fascinated by what she was seeing, and Chloe, although she quickly thought she had made a mistake, appreciated the softness of Leon's lips. She wanted to see if Amo was recording from an angle that showed a head turn, but in reality, she was directly in front of them. So, she continued with her first kiss for the sake of her scholarship. When they pulled away, she quietly apologized but proceeded with her final line, "I love you," which made John blush in every way. After cutting the take, Anal was fascinated by how well Chloe had acted, even though the blonde was trembling uncontrollably. Chloe apologized to John for her mistake in not remembering the side, though he didn't mind. He was just embarrassed. Chloe noticed his expression and felt embarrassed too, but she decided to avoid it by inviting him out to eat for the good work. In the meantime, Chloe was excited about how well the scene had turned out, highlighting Chloe's amazing performance. John, on the other hand, kept thinking about the last part that had taken him by surprise, forgetting for a moment that they were acting, as it felt more like a confession than part of the scene. Later, while enjoying a delicious pork dish, Amo and John were impatient, something Chloe noticed, but she encouraged them to savor the delicious meal. It turned out that these two shared similar tastes in condiments. While Chloe listened to their preferences, she expressed her gratitude for the hard work they had done. Both were happy that Chloe had finished on time, and the blonde requested the recording to send it to the teacher later. Amo emphasized how well they had done, noting that the kiss was the emotional touch that made them seem like a real couple. John gave all the credit to Chloe, considering her an example of commitment in acting. This inspired Emily, who expressed her desire to become as good as Chloe in the future. Although Chloe was embarrassed, Amo asked the blonde to teach her later. Despite her embarrassment, Chloe accepted the request. Before the food got cold, Chloe suggested they start eating. While they enjoyed the meal, Amo thanked Chloe for the gesture, even though the blonde had done it as a token of appreciation for the recording. After thanking Anoli, Amo said goodbye to the group, and they wished her a safe trip. John and Chloe walked together along the same path, commenting on the delicious food Chloe had invited them to. However, both also felt awkward about what had happened during the recording. While waiting for the bus, which coincidentally was the same line, they both noticed the situation. John realized they had never run into each other before. Chloe noticed Leon's discomfort, and to make matters worse, she wasn't good at starting conversations. The situation remained tense until they reached Leon's stop, which surprisingly was the same as Chloe's. As they got off, Chloe followed Leon closely, increasing his discomfort and making him feel like she was stalking him. She clarified that she was heading home, which seemed strange since John had never seen her near that area before. The reason was that they had different schedules. They chatted about good places to eat nearby, though neither of them knew much, as they had recently moved to the area. However, it became clear that Chloe had quite a bit of knowledge about food. The conversation took a turn when she changed the subject, apologizing shyly for the kiss. Leon didn't mind much, thinking it gave him a chance to explain. Chloe clarified that she had done it because the camera was directly in front of them and asked him not to misunderstand. She explained that she was extremely shy and embarrassed by it. At that moment, Leon explained to Chloe that no man would be upset if a cute girl kissed him suddenly, or at least, he wouldn't mind if it were someone he liked. He gave a detailed explanation, and Chloe listened attentively until he realized the nonsense he was saying. Nevertheless, John told Chloe not to feel bad since it was all just acting. This amused Chloe, making John laugh as well at all the previous explanations. In the end, it turned out that Chloe was his neighbor. The next day, he was waiting to see if she would respond to his messages, and he asked if it was in the main building. This seemed strange to Aeon. Leon's friends had invited him to play since he had been distant from them ever since joining the club. The girls in that place were really beautiful, and all they ever heard were rumors about that club. His friends wanted to know more about it, but John decided not to say much, avoiding any questions that might make things sound too compromising. Suddenly, someone bumped into Leon, apologizing for not seeing him. That's when he realized it was Emmy, which surprised both John and his friends. Ami was excited and had brought him something delicious. She expressed her desire to go to Leon's house, so she told his friends she was borrowing him and took him away as quickly as possible, leaving his friends charmed by her. When they saw the gift, it turned out to be a delicious meal that Emmy had cooked and wanted to share with John. She had prepared it especially for him and wanted to go to his house so they could enjoy it together. John liked the idea, as it sounded like an excellent offer. When they arrived at his house, Emmy was cooking and asked Aeon how things had gone with Chloe. He explained how Chloe apologized for the time and how successful the task was. Ani was proud of how good a person Chloe is, being one of the few who had earned John's approval. He believed it because he noticed Chloe was different from the first time he saw her. Emmy's view of her was sweet, even when her expressions were angry, which made John think that Chloe was actually quite expressive. Luckily, Emmy finished cooking, and the meal looked amazing. John hurried to eat as they talked, After finishing the meal, John mentioned that he needed to study for the upcoming exams, something Emmy didn't enjoy doing. However, she recalled a time when she worked on a group project with Han, who pressured her to get the work done, or else she'd fail. Because of that, Emmy didn't speak to Han for a week. Despite being intimidating, Emmy knew how to separate her studies from play, and John thought she was even better than him. Though Emmy didn't completely believe it, John struggled a lot at the beginning of his semester, watching others put in a lot of effort. This semester, John had spent more time partying, which he credited to meeting Emmy, and everyone knows how that turned out. John was thinking about asking for dessert, but Emmy had already brought one. She quickly got up and went to the bathroom, which excited John, thinking it would be a delicious treat. His imagination ran wild at that moment, but when Emmy returned, she surprised him with a different kind of dessert, the toys they had used before. This exceeded Leon's expectations in every way as they enjoyed their strawberry ice cream until they couldn't eat anymore. Later, they checked to see if Emmy's wrists were okay, but both of them felt awkward about everything that had happened. Because of that, Emmy decided to leave, feeling embarrassed. John offered to walk her home, which she found sweet, but declined. However, she reminded him about the meeting they had the next day and advised him to eat well before saying goodbye to him. The next day, we see Amole deeply focused until she looks up and realizes that Leon is right in front of her. John hasn't noticed her yet, and at that moment, he stumbles and almost falls face first to the ground. Emily can't help but laugh at the situation, finding it amusing, although Aeon isn't as pleased. Johan asks if Amole is heading to the club, and she nods. As they walk together, Amole is holding back in every sense. However, when she hears John warning her about a brick, she can't help but burst out laughing. When they arrive at the club, Amole stops laughing and greets everyone as they enter. However, the only person there at the moment is Chloe, as it isn't meeting time yet and they've arrived early. John jokes with the blonde, saying she's there plotting something, which doesn't amuse her. Seeing Chloe's reaction, the others try to calm her down as she seems embarrassed. Chloe remembers that both John and Amole must be feeling the pressure of their roles in the play, even though Amole won't be alone. Seeing them together, Chloe comments that they look cute and advises them not to feel too pressured, encouraging them to give their best effort. But this only adds to the weight of the pressure they were already feeling. After a while, the other club members start arriving, all excited for the meeting, except Han, who looks upset. John is the one who notices Han's attitude the most. With almost all the members present, the meeting begins, though it will be brief due to exams. The title of the play is You Can Look at Me, but the story and script are still in draft form. The heroine will be Amelie, with John as the protagonist. During the meeting, leaders are assigned for each section, and the more experienced members will assist the lead actors. It is also agreed that any updates will be communicated to Han. Preparations will begin the following week, with the condition that everyone must prepare adequately without neglecting their exams. Chloe informs them that they need to meet with the leaders of each section and will stay a bit longer with the lead actors. Meanwhile, Gina asks her section members to meet, but Han insists on speaking with the actors first, asking Chloe to speak with someone else. The blonde asks Han not to do anything strange, which Han doesn't understand, but she invites both John and Emily to join her, leaving them confused. Han waits for both Joe and Emily in a separate room. She doesn't want to take up too much of their time, only wanting a brief conversation. She explains that she initially considered casting someone else as the heroine, but since that person couldn't act, she decided to choose Amole again. Amole suspects that Han is just making excuses and had planned this all along. John senses the tension in the room. Han points out how busy Chloe is and mentions Amelie's luck in being able to accept the role. However, Han also shares her thoughts on the script, explaining that it contains explicit lines and scenes, and she asks Amole for her opinion. This reminds Amole of what happened in a previous play. She wants to understand the true intention behind Han's question, as Amole doesn't like that type of content. In a past play with a similar tone, Amole couldn't participate due to the scenes involved. For Han, it wasn't a problem since it only required taking off a shirt, and the script had been modified to adapt the scenes for the audience. However, Amole disagrees, wanting her play to remain as she wrote it. She realizes that Han only wants to spark audience interest. Han isn't concerned about this because her goal is to attract the largest audience possible. Amole, on the other hand, doesn't see such changes as artistic and begins to feel frustrated. Han argues that if they continue with moralistic plays, no one will want to watch them. She believes it's better to produce something more appealing to the audience. Han comments that because of Amelie's way of thinking, the club will never be more than just a club. Han isn't in it for the money. She has many people relying on her. If they don't see significant achievements, especially with an empty auditorium, their time, effort, and money will be wasted. She adds that members will leave one by one. Han firmly states that as long as she is president, nothing will change. The club has worked this way and will continue continue to do so despite Amole's opposition. Han describes herself as a lunatic and mentions that directing an unpopular play would hurt her self-esteem. She asserts that she does what she does because she enjoys it, and no one will interfere with that, just as Amole approaches art her own way. According to Amelie's one-sided opinion, this type of content isn't considered art. For Han, as long as there's a good plot, it qualifies as art. This affects Amelie because she knows her script isn't that strong. Emily remembers all these words from that day in the room of truth. After reflecting, Amole realizes that Han was right. After witnessing a play like A Midsummer Night's Dream, Amole discovers that the things she once rejected are now ideas she wants to incorporate into a similar story. With a change in perspective, she accepts the script Han wrote. However, she doesn't want to openly admit that those explicit scenes, which were so obvious, now interest her. She invents an excuse to avoid acknowledging that her previous stories seemed dull in comparison. Like Han, she enjoys creating plays for personal satisfaction and recognizes that it's wonderful, even though it sometimes annoys her to admit it. When Han hears this, she is speechless. Emily agrees to follow the script, surprising Han even more, who thanks her. However, due to the previous play and their relationship, Amole asks Han to apologize after the play, requesting that it be heartfelt. Han agrees, but only if Amole behaves well and fulfills her role. With that in mind, Amole leaves the room, determined to keep her promise. Han can't help but reflect on what they once had. And with this, we conclude the chapters of the second part. If you want more content, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and comment on how you found it. I'll upload the next part as soon as possible. See you in the next recap.